Hello, my name is Jack Stack and I'm an Earth Sciences major. I'm excited to talk today about my research with fossil fishes. Essentially, I'm going to be talking about what an ancient extinct long-nosed fish can tell us about broader patterns in the evolution of ray fin fishes. Before I get into that, I'd like to talk a little bit more generally about what I do. I'm a paleoichthyologist, which means I study fishes that have been dead for a long enough time to turn to stone. And basically, the goal of my work is to study the fossil record of modern groups of fishes to understand how the diversity of those modern groups has evolved and why those modern groups look the way that they do today. Now, before I get into that, there's something I want to talk about. The word fish can correspond to one singular fish. It can correspond to or refer to many individuals of the same species, or it could correspond to many individuals from different species or many different species of fish. So when I say the word fishes, I mean many different species, essentially. But it's convenient that all of these emojis are of ray fin fishes because that is the group that I am particularly interested in studying. The ray fin fishes are a group that is extremely diverse. They represent over 32,000 living species and includes everything from clownfish to swordfish to seahorses. Essentially, the ray fin fishes are any fish you can think of that isn't a shark, a stingray, a coelacanth, or a lungfish. Now, because ray fin fishes are so diverse, they're really important for modern ecosystems along with our economy and our food supply. My goal is to study the fossil record of ray fin fishes to try to understand why they are so diverse and try to understand how this diversity has evolved. Now, I wanted to give some context on the time period that I'm looking at, because we're all the way up here at the top in the present day, and the fish that I'm studying, called Taenia rhinichthyes, is all the way down here in the Pennsylvanian period, about 300 million years ago. Now, my goal with studying Taenia rhinichthyes is to basically try to understand what it would have been like as a living animal. So this involved creating this reconstruction. Now, before I delve into what this reconstruction means and what we can learn from it, I wanted to talk about how paleontologists reconstruct fossil animals. A lot of people are familiar with the fact that paleontologists spend a lot of time thinking about what extinct animals would have looked like, but I want to talk about how that's actually done. So as a paleontologist, you take your fossil material and you essentially examine it using your knowledge of other members of that group, particularly modern animals, to try to understand what information you have. So if I look at a specimen like this, I see the skull, I see the fins, I see the tail, and other details. And essentially I did that for all the specimens of Taenia rhinichthyes and used that to create a composite and reconstruct what it would have looked like as a living animal. I also used information from modern animals to know what it would have looked like as a fish, basically. So that yields this reconstruction. Now, understanding what Taenia rhinichthyes would have looked like as a modern, not looked like as a modern fish, would have looked like as a living fish is really useful because we can use it to infer its ecology. We can compare this reconstruction to modern animals, which we can observe directly, in order to make inferences as to how this fish would have moved and lived in its environment. Now, there's a couple of key features to point out here. Taenia rhinichthyes has an elongated snout. It has a mouth full with small, sharp teeth slung under that snout. It also has a thickened, elongated body. We also see that the dorsal and anal fins, the dorsal fin being on top and the anal fin being on the bottom, are positioned very close to the tail. And we also see that the tail, or caudal fin, is very small compared to the rest of the body. Now, I took this information and I compared it to modern animals, and I determined that Taenia is most similar to something like a modern sturgeon. Now, sturgeon are ray fin fishes that are bottom-feeding predators. Essentially, they cruise along the bottom of the freshwater environments in which they live, and they use this elongated snout to search for prey. Essentially, both sturgeon and Taenia rhinichthyes have elongated snouts with sensory organs that would have functioned in searching for prey in a bottom-feeding ecology. Now, these fishes have other similarities, including a mouth slung underneath this elongated snout, these thickened, elongated body shapes, dorsal and anal fins placed very far back near the tail, and their tails are very similar in shape. All of these similarities suggest that these fishes had a similar ecology. Now, the similarities are most likely not due to shared ancestry. Sturgeon and Taenibronychthes are separated from each other by hundreds of millions of years, but it's most likely that this phenomenon is due to a factor called convergent evolution. Convergent evolution refers to a phenomenon where independent lineages of biological organisms will evolve similarities due to a shared functional need. Essentially, this is when organisms that are not closely related move into a similar environment or ecology, or are doing a similar thing in their environment and evolve similar structures or morphologies as a result of that. A really good example is the evolution of flight. So we see here that flight has evolved independently in 3 different groups of organisms. It's evolved in reptiles, in the pterodactyls, it has evolved in birds, and it has evolved in bats. So all of these organisms have evolved flight independently, but because they have evolved structures for a similar functional need, they look relatively similar in a lot of ways. And essentially, this is most likely what is happening with Taenibronychthes and sturgeon. It's most likely that these similarities are due to convergent evolution on a bottom-feeding feeding strategy, essentially bottom-feeding ecology. But what does this tell us more broadly about the evolution of ray-fin fishes? On its own, not a lot. But if we put this into context with what's known about fishes from this time period, there's a really interesting pattern that emerges. So in the time period immediately before the Carboniferous, which is when Taenibronychthes was found, there was a massive extinction event that wiped out several other groups of fishes that originally were competing with ray-fin fishes. After these groups went extinct, ray-fin fishes exploded in numbers and in diversity. During this time period, we see the evolution of several new body plans, including the first eel-like fishes, the first deep-bodied ray-fin fishes, and now we know the first sturgeon-like ray-fin fishes. Now, all of this suggests that during this time period, in the aftermath of a mass extinction, ray-fin fishes exploded in diversity, and this suggests that the modern diversity of ray-fin fishes has its roots in the Carboniferous period. It basically started to come about around 300 million years ago because of a mass extinction event. So essentially, there's a lot that this tells us about why ray-fin fishes are so diverse, and the most important thing about that is that this modern diversity is not a new phenomenon. This is something that has been going on in ray-fin fishes for hundreds of millions of years, and in order to understand why ray-fin fishes are so diverse, we need to understand the origins of this diversity in the Carboniferous period. So just 2 key takeaways. Essentially, there's an ancient ray-fin fish that is similar to modern sturgeons because of mutual convergence on a bottom-feeding ecology. And also, the extreme diversity of ray-fin fishes that we see today has its roots in an ancient diversification event in the Carboniferous period in the aftermath of a major mass extinction. I hope this is enjoyable. Thank you very much.